welcome to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. We're two physical therapists living the life in Las Vegas. I'm Dr. Erica.
And I'm Dr. Joe. We created this podcast for two reasons. First, to connect the healthcare, wellness, and fitness communities in Las Vegas. And second, to highlight all the amazing people we've met along the way.
Thank you for listening, and remember to take care of yourself.
Today we speak with Danny and Carly of Revival Therapy. Carly is a licensed clinical social worker, and Danny is an occupational therapist. They created Revival Therapy to meet the physical and mental health needs of the Las Vegas community and facilitate family cohesion.
All right, so we're live, and we have Danny and Carly here. And would you mind introducing yourself and kind of tell us your backstory?
You can do that one first.
So I'm Danny. I've been in Vegas for how long?
Let's see, like 15 years?
Yeah, 15 years. This is my wife, Carly. We've been married for how long? We've been married for 15 years, and we've been in Vegas for about 14, 15 years, and we have 3 kids. We have a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 7-year-old, so a big gap. And I'm an occupational therapist. Carly's a licensed clinical social worker, so a mental health therapist, and we own Revival Therapy, which is a therapy company.
Yeah. And I was born and raised here in Vegas, and so went to high school here and grade school here, and then we met in college and then kind of moved back here. And I went to school both in San Francisco and Reno, and then came back here and finished schooling to do therapy.
Very nice. Mm-hmm. And what particularly do you guys do in with your company, Revival?
So we kind of do a holistic view. We work mostly with pediatrics. However, that's growing because a lot of the stuff that we do with pediatrics, we can do with adults, and it's really effective. So we do mental health, and then we also do the occupational therapy. And so coupled together, we kind of found that the two of them together is more of the holistic approach. So rather than just treating the mental health side, we're also treating more of like the physical, developmental stuff, and them coming together. So we do treatment both in office, in home, and we really like in home because it's in the kids and families' natural environment, and so they're able to kind of learn things that they can do in their environment to help out. And so that's kind of our model.
Right. We work with 0 through 90 years old, I guess, because we work with a lot of patients now with within the mobility clinic, like wheelchairs and all that. So that's kind of a newer field we just opened up to, but it's going really well to work with them. Just they don't have a whole lot of resources, so when we're able to provide occupational therapy to get them more functional, plus mental health for any of those trauma or issues that's happened, it's been a really cool approach to treat like this.
So how would you describe occupational therapy if people aren't familiar with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I know what it is. So OT is, we look at activities of daily living. That's a big word. So within the pediatric population and young adults, it would be, so we'll start like pediatrics. It's about getting them to do those occupations or typical activities of a certain age. So when we see an infant, we want them to start exploring their environment and getting their muscles able to creep and crawl and stand and walk up downstairs without tripping their own feet. We want to look at their cognitive skills, if they're able to identify colors and shapes and letters and write their name. And we do standardized testing, which shows the typical development, and we try and get them to close as that as possible. And then with teenagers, same thing. We do a lot of psychosocial stuff like coping skills. We work with kids with Down syndrome, through kids with borderline personality, through kids with autism, So we have a huge spectrum of people we work with to get them to be able to function typically and independently throughout the day. So I don't
And
know.
I'm sorry, how does the behavioral health approach linked to that?
So a lot of times, I mean, because obviously the depression, anxiety, trauma, all of that is stuff that we treat. And so the coupling of those two is that rather than just kind of sitting in an office setting and processing anxiety and then going about your week, when we couple it with the OT and we say, okay, now you also need to relieve this anxiety, you need to have movement in your day. You know, you need to have a structure and a routine that you're eating well, you know, and you're doing things in your community that help you engage with other people. And so that 1 hour of therapy is not always, we don't cover all of those things. But then when we're able to kind of couple with OT, which is working on daily functioning in your environment, then we use, so the coupling of them treats the anxiety. So where we can now process the anxiety and give them some coping skills, then OT can also give them additional coping skills.
And we would be the carryover. So they would do a lot with the mental health, and then we'll staff with the behavioral health therapist as an occupational therapist, and then we'll be like, okay, what worked? And then we'll work on those skills within our functional training and all that stuff during our session. So it flows pretty well, one through the other.
And Carly, with your age demographic that you're working with, is it hard to kind of switch off your, you know, pediatric mind where you're like really working with kids and then you will work with the, you know, the 85-year-old lady that's, you know, hanging out? So what is that like for you as a clinician? Like, what's that thought process like for you?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I started in early childhood, and I remember my supervisor always telling me, if you can work with early childhood, you can work with anybody. You know, that's the hardest. If you can come up with things to do with that age group, it transitions into any age group. And it's really interesting because that really is the case, is that 85-year-olds similarly like to have engagement, like to have reciprocal communication, like to play games, you know, that gets them to talk, like to have connections with people. And so it's interesting because it's the same model and you just tweak it with the age, where you're playing with blocks with an early childhood and then you're playing cards with an 85-year-old kind of thing. And all of it works on the cognitive piece and also allows them to process, where kids process more through play because that's their primary language. And the only difference is older people process through more verbal communication. So.
And they both wear diapers.
And they both wear.
Well, we're all picturing that one patient in the hospital, right? That you walk in and they're just not happy. And you're just like, how am I going to get through this treatment and get this person out of bed? So it is different in home though, you know, because it seems like they're more willing to engage because obviously they're at a higher status. But yeah, that's definitely the diaper issue too.
Yeah, but they're at home, so then they have their own supply of diapers, which is nice. If a mess occurs, it's in their home, so you don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
Which is nice. So as far as that's pretty wide spectrum of people that you treat. That's really impressive. Did you start off with doing pediatrics first, and then it just gradually became like, hey, we can see these other populations that we'd be able to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of pediatrics is not, like if you're just treating the kid, it's not really effective. You have to treat kind of the whole family. And so what we noticed is like, then we're working with the parents and we're coaching the parents. And we're like, oh, wow, they have their own trauma. You know, these parents have their own trauma. And so parents started asking, well, can you guys do, you know, what you do for my kid? Can you guys do this with me? Yeah, sure. And so then it kind of grew on that realm. And then I mean, you can speak for the OT because now doing the mobility clinics and the wheelchairs has kind of been a new thing for us.
Yeah, that's definitely been, I really like the wheelchair component. I like the fact that we do work with a lot of populations. We did start off with pediatrics, but our background is in pediatrics. So we met in college at Northern Nevada, UNR. We worked with kids with behavior problems. You know, we were she got stabbed with a pencil one day and bit, and it was, I mean, we were being attacked every day. It was a good time. So we did that, and then we did that for a couple of years, and then I transitioned to kids with autism, and then this is all during our undergrad, and then she went off to San Francisco and continued to work with kids with behavior problems. And I started more with autism, but then I stopped working with kids for a while, and I loved it. I love working with kids. So, and then in grad school, I started working with the wheelchair community and doing like, all the functional stuff like seating mobility and ADLs and shoulder mobility, all that stuff. So it's been cool to bring that population in also.
So for people that aren't familiar with ADLs, like what would you describe that as?
It would be like, it's just activities of daily living. It's like our focal point. With kids, activities of daily living, like I said, it's going to look different. It's going to be play. It's going to be school. It's going to be stuff you typically do during the day to get you through the day. So with adults, I mean, it's going to be meal preparation. It's going to be toileting, bathroom, bathing, getting dressed, social participation, talking with, it's such a broad spectrum, it really is. And I notice we're dealing a lot with cognitive stuff, which is fun too, but that would be ADLs, like those, those things you do throughout the day. So
I know it sounds like you guys had a common interest in pediatrics, but knowing a little bit about you, Danny, you didn't really go through the path right away. You want to tell us that kind of story with your background and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, you kind of have the same situation. You took a little break and you decide, you've seen you've seen the underbelly of the world. So I actually was gonna go into school to do ABA, because that's a big treatment approach to like autism. So then after school, I had that burnout, and I was gonna go into grad school for that. And I'm like, my buddy, I called him up because I'm like, I actually just want a job. Like I don't want to go back to school. So I called him up, and he was a police officer. So I called him and asked him how he liked it, and he loved it. So then 8 months later, I was in the police academy, and I did that for 10 years. I was with Department of Public Safety here in the state, parole and probation. They have Nevada Highway Patrol, investigations, and I was their employee for 10 years. And it was fun. I really did enjoy it. A lot of good stories, but 10 years was good for me. And that's when I was like, man, gotta do that school thing that I've been thinking about. So went back to do my prereqs, and that was it. So then I went to school here in Vegas, and then came out as an OT. So that, I don't know what was harder, 10 years as a police officer, 2 years in grad school. Especially because I went to school, I think, at 32.
Yeah. It was kind of like 3 years, really.
It was, it was 3 years. They lied to me. They lied to me. It was 3 years. It never stopped. And pure anxiety. So that's what we were talking about last time. You went back to school. Well, Erica, you did take a break, right?
Mm-hmm. I took a little break in between too, so we didn't go straight in as well. So it gives us a little bit different experience, different perspective sometimes.
Oh, it totally does.
We're like 10 years older than your classmates, and it's like, they're like, I stayed awake till 3 a.m. last night. I was like, I made it till like 10:30. I felt like I was doing really well.
And I'm grumpy.
Yeah, right. On my 4th cup of coffee already. Yeah.
My back hurts from sitting all day.
Right.
Yeah, it was fun though. It was good. You have to relearn to do everything, study, retain, read, but it was good.
And even the tools that are available right now compared to when we went to school previous, like we didn't have YouTube or any of those things. So like you can just get on and have someone else teach it to you if you missed the lesson or whatever. So then Yeah. So then when I saw the stuff the kids were doing when I went back to school, it blew my mind. Like Google Docs, like multiple people can type on this thing. Like that's crazy.
I didn't, I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what Google Docs was. I thought it was a weird professor.
Yeah.
I didn't know. So my cohort was really cool though. They were patient with me. They helped me out with that stuff because confusing, but yeah. Carly,
Man.
I know, the old man. You took a little break. You went to 2 grad schools. You went to San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't think I ever took a full break, but I definitely went slow. So, because in the middle of that, we got kids and trying to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
How was your school experience?
My school experience was good. I mean, it was.
Yours was long too.
It was really long too. Yeah, it was really long. Like I said, it wasn't like an expedited to be an LCSW, you do the bachelor's, and then you do the master's, and then you still have 3,000 hours under a licensed clinician. So it felt like it took.
So you can't
forever.
Isn't that crazy? 3,000 hours of
therapy. Being supervised. So, but
wow.
Yeah, and in the midst of that, I was at 2 different grad schools because after college I moved to San Francisco and started there, and then we got married and moved here, and so then I continued here. So
yeah, so in that meantime, that while Danny was working as a cop, you were practicing with mostly pediatrics, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's when he was a cop, I was working for the state also, so we both at some point were state employees, and I was the therapist with the state. And so I was working with early childhood mental health at that time.
So as you're noticing differences between working for the state and now you guys have your own practice, is you noted a difference in like how you run things, or just any differences or similarities, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, I think because we come from the state and they're super, black and white. So paperwork in terms of all that, we have really embraced that. Like that's Danny's talent, is like very detail oriented, making sure things are always ethical and best practice and all of that. So that's something I think you get from working for the state, is just the amount of bureaucracy and paperwork. And so you get to understand what that looks like. But then we've also seen quality of care. And so I think what we do that's different is we are very connected with all of our families. Like we know them, they know they can call us, on our cell phone. We have an awesome staff of people that also do that. And because of the holistic view and that you're in their homes, you're doing a lot more than just, here's your therapy session and goodbye and see you. I mean, we're very kind of interconnected with our families, which I think is awesome, because with the state, you can't really do that. So we kind of get to do the treatment model that we see best fit for every single client.
So how do you go about finding clients?
It's interesting because we've never really marketed.
We thought when we first got into this, I was just thinking it was going to be all marketing, and that our therapists were really good at getting clients and recruiting, for themselves. And then it just kind of, I mean, I don't know, we didn't really do advertising, just sort of, I think it's word of mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's where we get a lot of clients. We are pretty connected with, one of my really big passions is foster children and kids that have been adopted. And so we're pretty intertwined with the foster care Department of Family Services. So we get caseworkers that give us referrals that way. We're really connected with a couple of adoption groups in town. And so, parents in that group. So we get some referrals that way, and just word of mouth.
So we were foster parents, and our older 2, we fostered them, and then we adopted them. So that's kind of where our connection and everything came into she was a social worker, so obviously she dealt with placements and all that, but then we did foster care and then ended up adopting, and so that's a lot of our connection too within that.
What is that process like? I've had some friends who have adopted some, I think they're in their like 7 or 9, and they're adopted some sisters, and they kind of told me some of the process. What was that process like for you guys?
Oh, it's awful.
It was great.
It is.
We're both like, oh god.
Yeah.
The kids were great. Just the process.
No,
But
it's just rough, like bureaucratic, and it, as well as it should be. You know, you don't just want to send kids to poor placements, but it's a lot.
I think
of
it's
hands
really
in the pot.
improved a lot because we did this back a long time ago. I mean,
Yeah.
our 2 oldest are 18 and 19 years old, and so I think they've sort of streamlined the process a lot. But it's about 30 hours of kind of classes and that you do initially, and background checks, and then they come out and they license your home and, you know, make sure they have all the safety things. And then, you know, you take, if you decide, are you just a foster placement? Are you a foster to adopt? Or do you just want kids that are legally free, that you're, you know, if their parents are no longer involved, they're birth parents, and so they're going to come straight into your home and adopt. So there's kind of 3 different options. I know that our heart is, obviously we do a lot with adoptive parents, and just in that transition process where they're still, you know, seeing their birth parents and the adoptive parents, and the confusion and all that, and the kids' confusion and all of that. So,
Right.
And that's a lot of stuff where the classes don't necessarily cover like the feelings of everybody in those. And so, so we feel that's a really good piece that we cover a lot with foster families. But it's a long, I mean, I think now they've streamlined it to like 2 to 3 months. You can get licensed, and there's a lot of kids in the system right now. And so, I think they're trying to make that easier so kids can get placed in homes. Yeah,
it's such a big community here with foster care needs and all that. So it's definitely.
I think you have a unique perspective, though, because you do have your mental health, you know, background in that. So do you feel like that is something that you guys were able to use in terms of like how you kind of transitioned into like having a new family member? Or is that something that as well, like if somebody else were to do that, would they have that ease of a transition, if you will? Or is it just, it's going to be a hard transition regardless?
Well, our kids would tell you we were super annoying because everything was therapeutic.
Yeah, they're always like, we know everything. We know we're supposed to think this, or we think that, you know, they have very good insight. They always say like, we're emotionally more intelligent than any kid our age. We take perspective of everything. So no, but it's definitely, I think we were really young and just very fresh out of our programs. I mean, I was still in my master's program, so we've learned a lot along the way. I think that's part of our heart, is that, yes, I was in that system, but then being a parent in that system and being able to speak as just, you need to do this, and, you know, make sure you do this. And now being in that position where I am the parent, it's given us a really cool perspective of what these parents are going through. And then also kind of using, now that we've grown, like a lot more of like our trauma focused lens when we're, but that came with a lot of experience of not so awesome parenting in the beginning.
Well, because I had the 2 roles for these poor girls for the first, I think, however many years I was a police officer. So you have that lens on where I'm like, you're not going outside, someone's going to get you, or blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you have that hardcore lens of the world's doomed. And then you have later on, you have that therapeutic lens where it's like, what hurt your feelings today? So you have, I think that they were like, whoa, this is a big change. So, but I think it was good. It's funny though. That's always what they say. They're like, man, 2 therapist parents. So put them through the ringer with that, all 3 of our kids, but they're good. They're all really good kids. So yeah.
That's fun.
So what do you normally do to spend your time in Las Vegas?
Ooh, yeah. What do we do?
We like going out to eat. We really like hiking. That doesn't happen too much in Vegas, but we do have Utah really close to us. So we love driving there and hiking, and obviously Mount Charleston. We really love cooking. We know you guys do, you know, therapy and all that awesome stuff with CrossFit and athletic training, and we have a CrossFit gym in our garage. So we do that religiously. Religiously, we go to church and then we go to the gym and do our workouts every morning, and then start the day with homeschool and
and most of our weekends, I would say that we try not to be in Vegas. no, we've been just when in the summer, especially, we kind of like, we'll travel to the outskirts of like, Utah or Arizona or California and try and do outdoor. We've recently got into paddle boarding and fishing. So that's not like in the Vegas area, but we'll travel a little bit. Well, we've done it at Lake Mead several times too, and that's been fun. So
yeah, paddleboarding is a lot of fun. That's one thing that we've got into when we were in school as well. And not as many places out here to do it, but Lake Mead, Lake Las Vegas, there's a few good spots for it for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the blow-up ones are awesome.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Which we didn't really know about. And so we're totally into that.
Do your kids go too?
Our 7-year-old loves it. So she's the one that asked for a paddleboard for her birthday. And so that was our first.
Well, we told her to ask for it because
we really wanted it. We should really get a paddleboard. And she was like, we had like showed her some movies.
She's all, what's a paddleboard?
she's good at it and she can balance. And the big girls, they're not as into it. Like they'll go to the lake with us, but they'd rather just like float. Just get a raft and float. So
take Instagram photos, things like that.
Exactly. Here at the lake, having so much fun.
That's good. That's the life, right?
Yeah, I didn't think about that. But that, as far as for kids for paddleboarding, that might be a really good like tool actually, just for like teaching balance and like getting them some kind of input. Especially inflatable ones, like those move a lot easier on the water. They rock a lot more than the solid ones, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Well, because they're lighter, right?
Yeah, because they're lighter. So there's a lot of boats, like you could feel that more on an inflatable one than you can a solid one.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's like such a good segue. I mean, that seems to be a lot of the issues we're even seeing with kids is outdoor activities is crucial for developmental milestones and all that stuff, and balance and strength and endurance. And you're right, paddleboarding challenges all that, but what we're seeing a lot is kids aren't doing that stuff anymore. Like I would say if there's one huge issue we see with younger kids today, it's screen time. And so we'll do talks. We do talks to foster parents, to biological parents. We've done talks and specifically about like increased screen time and how all the rest of your brain doesn't get developed if you're sitting there staring at a stagnant screen. You know what I mean? So that's why we're seeing so many issues with kids is just increase a sedentary lifestyle and lack of movement and going outside. And when the wind blows, we see kids unable to even be outside because they can't handle that sensory input, right? So we have so many sensory issues now and balance issues and strength and endurance issues. So that's a great point that paddleboard or any physical activity, you know what I mean, provides that. So that's probably our biggest thing we see for developmental delays is lack of movement and engagement in typical things. So that's been huge.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the likelihood that somebody could catch up to that? So if they have developmental delays because they are not doing things like going outside and playing, like is all lost after a certain age, or is it you can get like a certain percent? Or what do you feel like the recovery process? Well, I don't know about the word recovery, but what do you feel like that process would be as far as trying to get those skills?
I would say that, so a big diagnosis now is actually global developmental delay. And if you think about that, it's just a generic thing to say, this kid is not meeting milestones and I don't know why. Give them that diagnosis. And I know it is, it's lack of challenge. You guys know that, like, if you don't challenge a patient or if you don't challenge even an athlete, it's use it or lose it, or don't even, get it. You have to challenge not only your brain, but your body. So if these kids aren't challenging anything, their brain's staying stagnant. It's not developing appropriately. They have less bone density. They have less cardiovascular ability. It's everything. So I would say that once it's so weird, it is so weird to see a kid who's like 6 years old and be able to fine tune their movements during catch, and then how much they retain the next day or the next week. I mean, I can't even believe it. I know, and Erica, I don't know, like when you were at the hospital and you'd see a patient and then you'd see him 2 weeks later, like sometimes you'd be like dumbfounded, you know, and that's how it is with kids too. It's the same thing. You're like, man, I can't believe that simply getting you to do, you know, opposite side synchronization or balancing or even jumping jacks or catching a ball, like the improvement is crazy just to get them to do focused movement and that's purposeful. Like it's incredible how much they will. And it's more too, because if you think about just catching a ball, you need to have the visual motor skills. You need to have upper extremity coordination. You need to have bilateral coordination. You need to have balance. You need to have, the biggest thing is focus. Like you need to have visual attention to get that target that's being thrown at you. So something like that, just a simple activity that we will do, will get all these skills and all those cortical regions of the brain active. And it's really cool to see how quick kids can start getting new skills, you know?
And I think a lot of the work comes if it's repetitive. And so that's why it's so cool for us to be in the homes and teaching the parents. A lot of parents just don't know, you know, they're like, the kid's screaming, I hand him the iPad and then he's quiet, you know? And so then when we're kind of having that education, like, well, you know, if you try this instead and do this every day, and before he gets on the iPad, make sure he's doing physical activity. If they're consistent with it through the week, it's crazy how much progress a kid can make quickly. If they're only doing it when we come out, then that's a little harder. It's a little more challenging to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah, so Carly, you've been practicing for a while. Did you notice that, you know, early in your career as well with the whole, you know, screen time thing? Did you see that as a pattern as doing 10 years ago?
It's funny. No, I feel like this is new. I mean, in the last, like we've been talking, maybe in the last 5 years where, and maybe I was just ignorant to it and I didn't see as much of it or didn't focus on it as much, but I feel like there was a lot more kids playing, and just maybe there wasn't as much access to phones, and now it seems like, I mean, this is like our big soapbox is like I'll be walking down the street and
knocking phones out of kids' hands.
I mean, seriously, like there will be like a 6-year-old watching something. I'm like, why are you letting your kid walk and watch something that, you know, like instead of like looking around, and they're like bumping into people. And so, and I had not noticed that until the last couple of years of how much things have changed. So,
well, and then you have, you have the whole developmental thing, but then you have, what are your kids watching? Like one time I walked in, and my youngest was watching like a grown man playing with a toy, and I guess it's his channel. I mean, either way you say it, it's weird, but I guess it's his channel to
watching people play.
Well, yeah, how about it's his channel to like advertise a toy. Like we're supposed to trust a grown man playing with toys, and his review of the toy is going to be like, gotta get that one. But yeah, so you don't know what they're watching either. So it's super important to be educated and aware of what your kids are watching, because that alone could be traumatizing if they're sitting there watching something that their brains can't handle, you know? So it's
hard. It's a hard road, and it's, technology for kids keeps them quiet, you know, and that's a really hard thing for parents to wrap their minds around, is like, well, what am I going to do with all this free time? We're always talking about, what did you guys do as kids? Like, what are some things that you did when you were a kid that maybe you could implement for your kids now? Because I know you didn't all have iPads, you know, so.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. So they're like, well, Dad, Chester says this is the best My Little Pony to get. And you're like, who?
He said he's stopping by to deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well,
he also
no,
has a van that gives out free candy. This guy's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is, but I would say that is one of the biggest challenges our culture face. I mean, it seems like it's global now, but our youth face is social media, and increased screen time is just wreaking havoc, and no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to discuss how much like depression it causes, how like developmental growth and coordination, and it's just that's our soapbox. We're probably going on and on about it, but that's our big like
big one.
When we get a kid, we're like, how much screen time are they getting? Like, like that's a huge one. So
I did want to elaborate that on, and to just get your insight on what you're seeing in your daily treatment, and what you're noticing as like a part of that, Carly, too, because that's your main thing that you do. So just if you can give us more insight about it.
Well, speak on like teenagers in social media.
I mean, with everything, there is like
right.
increased anxiety, increased depression, increased behavioral issues, higher suicide rates, so there's just so much. When we talk about like a kid's having nightmares, right? And so it'll be like, well, what was their trauma history? Because you look at that a lot with sleep, but then it's like, oh, they don't have a trauma history. It's because they're watching, 5 hours of Fortnite with, like, so it's really interesting, like how anxiety is really spiking because little kids' brains can't handle that amount of input, especially, what they're watching consistently. And then with teenagers, it's crazy because we talk about like when we were teenagers, if someone was going to leave you out, or you weren't invited to a party, or you weren't invited to a friend's house, you didn't even know about it, right? It's like, okay, but now it's like, it's on Instagram, or they're snapping and you're the one that's not included. And so now it's like this whole spiral of like, well, they got together and I was left out. And so it's creating this increased depression and isolation, like we talk about, you have like 1,000 friends on social media, but like you don't see anyone, like you have actually no connections, but you think you have tons of connections. And so that's hard for teenagers. It's hard, even with like COVID just starting and everything being like on Zoom, that's hard for people to not have these connections. But that's what teenagers are doing now, like that's their social time, is being on these, on social media. And so, so we're seeing a lot of increase in mental health in general because of this, for sure.
It's also kind of interesting too how much has changed communication. So like I remember when I was a kid that you'd have to write down your friend's phone number because you didn't have any device that would memorize it for you. Then you had to call them and then see if they were home.
We had to dial it first.
Yeah, you had to dial it. Yeah. Especially if you had one of the phones that was like a rotary one.
Yeah.
You'd call them and then they're like, oh, sorry, like your friend's not here, but they'll be here at this time. So I feel like then, like if you were meeting someone at the movie theater and you told them that you'd be there at 4:30, you had to be there at 4:30. Otherwise, they would not trust you anymore.
Yes.
Somebody could just send you a text message like, oh, sorry, my dog just threw up on the rug. I can't go. And you're like, oh, that's weird that you texted.
Why'd you have to send the picture?
Yeah, exactly. Is that picture moving? Like, what is that? Yeah. So,
but right there, I mean, you just named so many skills with that: sequencing, recall, social participation, right? You just in remembering a phone number and following up to see, like, yeah, that stuff is you. And not only that, but the ability to not just send a text, be like, hey, can't be there. You have to call your friend, be like, hey, I can't make it. And then that empathy component, having them be like, oh man, I was really, and then you're like, dude, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? But that ability to have that reciprocal conversation and emotional component, rather than just that text and just whatever, can't be there. So I think that plays an impact too, is lack of empathy. And I mean, it's absolutely, so many skills have been lost over the past, the spike in screen time and in social networking, all that stuff. So
yeah, I've noticed that too. Yeah, as Danny, we were, as you could kind of tell how we communicate in terms of like whether we communicate better with text or email or in person, or we talk better on the phone or whatever that is, right? And I don't think we have the opportunity to do that. As I mean, I don't know if you guys are noticing this too in your in-home setting, is that way of communication typically, like, and I see people who just like text and that's what they prefer. And I like to communicate in person. Like that's just how I tend to enjoy, being able to touch somebody,
Right.
like, touch their hand or give them a high five or give them a hug or whatever type of communication we're doing. But have you noticed like that has changed as well, kind of in your day-to-day treatment and like how people are interacting with, their environments?
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. I mean, we were like, so this kind of goes with it, but we were so excited that like the neighbor kids came down and like knocked on our door and asked our 7-year-old to come play, because we, like just that connection where I'm like, people aren't outside anymore. Like people aren't just engaging and, just enjoying each other, and that connection of communication, it's all, so, I mean, definitely that's been lost too. Of just,
Yeah, having to go to the house, that was one of the best parts of being a kid,
That's right. You
Waiting
get
for
that new
the
Nintendo game, you
scary
gotta
dad
show it
to
to your
answer.
friends.
What's that?
You get that new Nintendo game, you gotta go show it to your friends. You have to bring it over to their house. You couldn't play it over the internet.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. That stuff was great.
And conflict resolution has been, because kind of to your point is that text messages back and forth, like you don't really know what's being said, and so you interpret things, and then it's kind of this like, well, what do they really mean? And it's like, pick up the phone or have lunch, work out the conversation, because the back and forth is getting lost in translation. So that's something that it's just funny, even like dealing with our clients to like set up sessions. It's like, what did you mean by that? And what is so?
It's definitely
a lot of lost communication, and lots of lost skill. I mean, I haven't seen the last time that I've communicated with one of my clients that's a teenager other than text or like face to face, but it's not like they're going to call. They don't even have any. And then when they go to apply for a job and I'm like, hey, follow up. What do I say? What do I say when I follow up? Do I say hello? Do I, so just those basic skills that we had just naturally, I think, growing up that has been lost.
That's kind of crazy. We have some friends that teach and do things online, and they were just saying that they're really noticing that the like emotional intelligence of kids is like really getting kind of lost, and they don't pick up on social cues as much. Have you noticed that is the same thing? Because you mentioned earlier that the kids are watching more time on YouTube, but then your kids have an awareness of what emotional intelligence is because you tell them about it, and they it's defined and they clearly understand it. So have you noticed that has changed at all as far as the kids that you're dealing with?
Oh, for sure. I mean, one thing, our kids are like probably so mad at us for eternity, but we didn't let them have phones, like smartphones, until they were 18 years old.
So that's actually funny. They had no social media account or anything. And I know because I caught it once and then we got rid of it, but they thanked us for that. And they said there was a definitive moment when all that stuff started happening where that's the anxiety, because it's as if you're not invited to a party. So in the 90s or whatever, if you weren't invited to a party, you didn't necessarily have to find out about it. Like it was pretty easy not to find out about it. And then, now it's thrown in your face like that night. Yeah. And you're like, dude, I wasn't even invited to this thing. I thought we were friends. And it's just like, that's
what they were saying. They were like, I'm so glad. Cause now they're, 18 and 19 and they just have it. Like our 18-year-old just got it 4 months ago. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is awful. But it really does show, like, not in terms of our parents, just the model is that they are able to have conversations with adults, make eye contact, read people's social skills. I mean, it's definitely different with kids that don't, that get a phone when they're 9 years old. And that's kind of that's what happens from there on out. So,
That's pretty impressive. And now Eric and I were talking about this the other day, and it's kind of sad, but Now when you see a kid that's actually good at interacting with adults, you're like, oh wow, like that kid's amazing. That kid's so well behaved, and that should be like a normal thing. But now you see this kid that looks at your face, and you're like, whoa, like something on me, like this kid's staring at me, and then you realize the kid's just paying attention. And went out to eat with somebody, and the kid, her favorite band was Queen, and she like knew a lot of the words to the songs, and just a really cool kid in general. I'm really impressed. And then didn't touch her phone when all the adults are talking. Yeah. She was like obviously engaged in the conversation. And she was what, like 8 or something like that?
No, I think a little older, but she answered questions. I thought that was incredible. Like I asked her a question and she conversed with us. I was like, wow, this is so refreshing to see.
You have human skills. Yeah, no. You're going to be president one day.
Cure cancer, kid.
Yeah, I mean, if you do think about it, to get a job now, as a teenager, it's such a low set. You need to have eye contact and show up within 5 minutes of the, like, besides you do that, you're hired. But you know what I mean? It wasn't always like that. So I think the standards of everything, standardized testing is going down with scores as far as coordination and stuff. At least the testing occupational therapists use is overall, the standards are getting lower as a culture. And it shows a lack of engagement, you know? So we have to compare it to a normative population. And if the normative population's down, obviously now the standard's down. So it's definitely a thing we have as far as, you know, are a big step to getting a kid to meet those milestones and all that. So yeah,
your kids will probably definitely appreciate it later in life too. Because I remember as I look back at it now, I didn't get a phone until like a certain age too, and I was like, I appreciate that I had to wait for that point. So now I think I appreciate delayed gratification way more than I ever have. You know.
Were your parents pretty strict?
Oh yeah.
I know your mom's watching. Were your parents pretty strict?
Oh yeah, we had like a 9 o'clock bedtime. Wow. My dad would be like, "You 9:01, like you're like not 9:02. Your butt's in bed," is what he would always say. So
right,
I can appreciate it though. Like I got a good amount of sleep. Yeah. Right, I was able to function the next morning and wake up and play, and I would hang out with my friends or whatever that may be. But it gives you, I don't know, I feel like we're just like old souls, like just like we're just like talking about back in my day, but we really seriously, I think it's something you guys work with in a daily basis, and something we interact with as as we are the people that have the impact that we can actually make a change in some of these things. I think it's important that we talk about it, because the screen time that you guys mentioned, just even the pure education of that and making people aware of that, I think it will go, like you have no idea how much that will help people in the future, especially the kids that you're working with.
Yeah, I think so. That's a big part of all of our treatments. We actually are going to start working with police officers too. We're getting a contract with the city to start working with police officers who are involved in shootings, or if they had accidents, or if they have any mental health or anything like that. So that's going to be the newest field we work on as far as behavioral health and all that for mental health therapy. So hopefully that can make a big impact on the community as well. But that's our other passion too, is helping people through that trauma.
And how do you guys deal with it? Because you hear trauma, as practitioners, and you hear these stories. How do you guys cope with it? Because it's hard to hear some of the stories, and I'm sure you hear sad stories, happy stories, and everything in between. Like what's something that you guys use as your trick?
I think that with trauma, it's such a normative thing, because people think of trauma as maybe abuse or something like that. But I mean, you have trauma can occur at any stage in life, whether it be physical trauma, mental trauma, or trauma that happened in utero, drug exposure or alcohol exposure. And trauma is basically an event that alters functional behavior. So I think that realizing that trauma is normal everyone has some sort of traumatic event that happened to them, and we still need to learn to function on a daily basis, right?
Yeah. I mean, us personally, I think like working out is a huge just like coping skill for us, is I think it releases a lot of that stuff. And then like prayer, like just constantly pray for the people, knowing like, you know what, that happened and we can't control what happened, you know, but and we're also like, you know, not the saviors, you know, we're not going to be able to fix everything for that person, so we can be there for them and
get them those skills,
to get them the skills that they need. And so but it's definitely, I would say that's a big challenge, is when you hear like really hard stories and it's like, how could this all happen in one person's life, you know, or why is this happening, and just kind of, you know, not having a lot of options that you're not able to really control it. And so you got to keep yourself healthy, you know, to be able to help and to be a listening ear to those people. So.
No, that's awesome. I think that's it's something you hit on, you know, right away with the health portion. Keeping yourself healthy is probably one of the coolest things, and you know, the best thing you can invest in some cases, right? Just making sure that you're doing what you can for your health, so you can help other people, right? And so that's, if you're not healthy, you're no use to anybody else, right? It's the whole concept of, you know, if you put the oxygen on first and then you help somebody else.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's really true.
That's awesome.
So what's something that you've learned that you wish you knew sooner?
I would probably, for our business, knowing our roles. Like I like A, B, C, D, like very organized stuff like that. And if everything's out of order, I don't function, and I'm traumatized.
We did like this temperament test, similar to like a personality test. And with that temperament, like really figured out that we have different temperaments and that we focus on different things of importance, and feeling like knowing each other now and knowing what he thinks is important versus what I think is important, and really coming into our roles that we have totally different things, where he's more of like a perfectionist. And so he likes all the paperwork and the business side and everything run a certain way, where I don't care about that. And I'm much more like love and not that he doesn't, but I love engagement with people, and I love the hands-on stuff with people and connecting with other people. And so figuring out how we do that in our roles, and me maybe supervising more of the staff where he more does the back stuff. So that's been awesome. And there's a little bit of like, when we started this, we had to really tweak some things, but we got it now.
No, that's fun. What's the name of that temperament test?
What is it called? It's like colors test.
Okay.
So it's like red, blue, yellow.
But what is it called? I say this, you heard that. That's what it's called. So it's like saying that you could say the same thing to somebody, and how they interpret it is different, you know. And then it kind of talked about the different strengths of each color. There was 4 colors, and then the weaknesses. And so, okay, where are our strengths and where do they lie? And some of our weaknesses, you know, we're going to give those to you, and then that way I don't have to deal with them, kind of thing. So.
I love it. Delegation of that, right? It's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's worked out. It's good.
Yeah.
What's something that you can answer individually, that you're excited about, you know, whether it's mentally, physically, you know, business wise, you know, anything like that. What's something that you're excited about?
I feel like I get excited about like new adventures just in general. So I'm always like, hey, we should do this, you know, like we should be. So right now we're doing like a PE class for kids at church or whatever. And I'm super excited about that. And we're like, oh, we're going to do this game and this game. So like little things like that.
Right.
And then adventures, like we just recently, actually
for traveling and stuff.
Yes.
We're going to,
we got a truck now, which is like, for some reason we think is awesome.
Moving on up.
Nice.
This truck is like taking us on all these adventures in our head. Like we have lots of stuff planned with this truck.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, so we always get excited about like new travel plans and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Off-roading as well? You a little 4x4?
No,
I don't know if we're gonna
off-roading.
dive into that.
I don't know. Let's pump the brakes a little. That's a little no, I think yeah, it'll be we like camping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a new adventure. But I agree, new things are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, just traveling, hiking, stuff like that. Working out, all those things we really enjoy.
So what's something that you want to leave listeners with?
Ooh, that's our cue to quit talking. What would I say? I don't know. I would say that
I think for like one thing is just a holistic view or a holistic approach with everything is super important. So you can't just like focus on one thing, you know, like if you feel like you have anxiety, if you feel like look at all the different domains and aspects and kind of, you know, is it because I'm not getting enough social interaction? Is it because I'm not treating my body healthy? Is it because, you know, I'm worse? So just kind of looking at things with perspective of like all the different realms and kind of figuring out, because I think all of those things couple to create things either positive or negative. So that's what I would say. I don't know.
yeah, no, I agree. I think that yeah, I don't know. We bash the screen time. What else can we bash? I don't know. But yeah, I would agree with that. Just it's a holistic view's super important to treatment, the whole person. So in their whole environment. So
Oh, we almost forgot. What's your favorite cheat meal?
ooh, that's a good
I cheat
one.
like every day, everything. So I don't know. Desserts for me. Like,
yeah, yours are definitely desserts.
Ice cream, brownies.
So I've managed to know that if I start a cheat, it doesn't stop. So I don't keep like chips is a big one for me. Chips and pizza. So I'm like, yeah, right. So
That's your thing.
Oh yeah, I love chips.
I'm like, man, and that's just what I've realized. So that's how I've modified my behavior is let's not keep chips in the house because
I told Joe that too, and he's like, "I want some chips in the house." I'm like, "No, I can't get started."
Well, we don't keep them in the house because they get eaten on the way home in the car. We don't keep them in the house.
So are you
gone before they even show up?
Who has moderation out of you two? Like who's able to, can you have a couple chips and then the others like keep that away from me? I don't know when to stop. Is that?
Dude, it's like anything. I'll like gummy bears or like gummies, like anything like chips, any fries. Like I'll just crush a whole lot of them. And he's like, I gotta put this back away.
I'm like, all right, 42 gummies is enough. So yeah, I don't know, but for me, it's like bakery goods, like any kind of like a good pastry type thing or something that's cooked or baked like that is really, really hard to turn down.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
So how can people find you?
We have a website. All of our information's on there. We have a
revivaltherapyvegas.com.
Yeah, so revivaltherapyvegas.com is our website. We we just beat up social media. We have this is pretty bad. We have an Instagram, but I don't know what it is. But I think it's on our website.
I think it's the same. Revival Therapy.
It's probably the same.
Instagram.
So we have an Instagram and
Insta and
Facebook, all that stuff. But I think it's all on the website. So I don't know the names of the others, but that's how you would find us. All our information's on there. So
and we'll have that information in the show notes too. If people want to be able to look it up, it'll be on there.
Very good.
Well, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for everything that you're doing. It sounds like you're really helping change a lot of people's lives for the better. Look forward to seeing great things from you.
Yeah, we appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks for
this
having
was
us
fun.
on.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
We'd like to thank you for listening to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. We hope you enjoyed the time with our guests as much as we did. It would help us out so much if you could share, subscribe, or review our podcast or any combination of the three. Thanks again, and remember to take care of yourself.